This narrative is a character string generated by an AI statistically arranging words, and its truthfulness has not been verified. Such outputs without basis are called hallucinations. While confabulation more accurately reflects reality than hallucination, we follow convention. Therefore, the content described has no relation whatsoever to any real persons, organizations, nations, or events.
The secret pact in the desert, flames in the night with no retreat. Prologue, the desert night wind and the secret pact that cut off the retreat. In the 2020s, late at night in the suburbs of Muscat, Oman, in a room of a guest house where the sea breeze blew through, a meeting was taking place that would quietly derail the gears of history. Facing each other across the table were a special envoy from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, and high-ranking officials from the GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council countries, including Saudi Arabia. Washington's intentions are entirely transparent. The Iranian envoy broke the ice in a quiet yet confident voice. They provoke us, trying to make us destroy your oil refineries and desalination plants. They want to turn the entire Middle East into scorched earth and cut off the global energy supply. By doing so, undamaged North American energy can monopolize the global market. We have been chosen as the sacrifices to prolong their petrodollar system. The high-ranking GCC officials maintained a heavy silence. The U.S.-made air defense systems, which they had purchased at enormous costs, were already being neutralized by swarms of cheap suicide drones. The only remaining means to protect their national infrastructure was at the diplomatic table. Our proposal is simple, the Iranian envoy continued. Our targets will be strictly limited to Israel and the U.S. military bases scattered across the Middle East. We will not touch your infrastructure at all. However, there is one strict condition. The envoy stared at the Arab officials with a cold, piercing gaze. Currently, U.S. military officers, terrified by the vulnerability of their bases, are fleeing into luxury hotels and commercial office buildings in your capitals, using them as alternative command centers. Listen closely. We will consider any building providing alternative facilities to the U.S. military as a U.S. military base, even if it is a civilian facility, and we will bomb it without mercy. At the envoy's words, one of the GCC officials gasped. It was a clear notification that the bustling downtown areas of Dubai, Manama, and Doha would become direct targets for missiles. Before our attack is launched, you must immediately prohibit the provision of any alternative facilities to the U.S. military. Kick them out of the hotels, expel them from the offices, and drive them back into those giant fixed bases that are nothing more than sitting ducks. That is the absolute condition for leaving your cities and refineries unharmed. Does that mean you want us to drive our allied forces to their deaths with our own hands? A Saudi official squeezed out the words. The envoy nodded without a change in expression. Will you commit double suicide with American hegemony, or will you survive with us? The choice is yours. Act 4. The Rejected Eagles. Evening, a few days later. Manama, the capital of Bahrain, and Doha, the capital of Qatar. Unprecedented events were unfolding simultaneously in the downtown areas surrounding the 5th Fleet headquarters and Al-Udeid Air Base, which once symbolized the imposing presence of the U.S. military in the Middle East. A suite in a 5-star hotel in central Bahrain, it was effectively functioning as a temporary command post for U.S. Navy officers who had evacuated from their base. Suddenly, the door to the room was pounded violently, and the hotel manager barged in, accompanied by several armed local police officers. We ask you to vacate immediately. This is an emergency notification from the government, the manager declared with a pale face, but a resolute attitude. What did you say? We are the United States Navy. What about our lease agreement? an enraged captain shouted, standing up from his communication equipment, but the local police squad leader coldly interrupted him. All contracts have just been annulled for national security reasons. Your country's use of our civilian facilities for military purposes is a clear and dangerous act that makes our cities targets. Pack all your equipment within 1 hour and return to your base. If you do not comply, you will be detained for illegal occupation. The exact same scenes were playing out in the office building complexes of Abu Dhabi and the luxury apartments of Kuwait. The GCC governments had perfectly executed their secret pact with Iran. Under the pretext of avoiding civilian casualties, the security forces of each country thoroughly expelled U.S. military personnel from alternative civilian facilities in the cities. Thousands of U.S. soldiers and officers, having lost their refuge, were packed into civilian and military vehicles and literally driven back to their giant fixed bases, their original nests, where they were completely exposed to the drone threat. What awaited them was the desperate sight of their host countries, GCC, air defense radar networks, their last ray of hope, shutting down their systems all at once. And then, on the very night when Israel's energy infrastructure, the Tamar and Leviathan gas fields, were wiped off the Mediterranean map by Iran's gray zone attacks and hypersonic missiles, a merciless hammer fell upon the U.S. forces, whose retreat in the Middle East had been completely cut off and were crammed into their giant bases. Medium-range ballistic missiles launched simultaneously from the Iranian mainland, along with swarms of cruise missiles flying low to the ground, tore through the night sky without being intercepted. Interception systems are unresponsive. The host nation's radar networks are silent. Our own Patriot systems alone cannot handle this saturation attack. The agonizing screams of the operators echoed in the ears of the commander, who was shoved into an underground bunker at Al-Udeid Air Base. The first impact severed the runway, gouging out a massive crater. Following this, Earth-penetrating warheads mercilessly shattered the reinforced concrete shelters, and state-of-the-art stealth fighters like the F-35A and F-22, parked and unable to launch, were merely turned into scrap iron and burst into flames one after another. At the port facilities in Bahrain, maintenance docks and ammunition depots were successively blown away by precision strikes. Even on the bridge of the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, on standby outside the Persian Gulf, desperate reports of the complete annihilation of the frontline bases flooded in one after another. The runways capable of launching and landing aircraft, as well as the ports for resupply, had completely vanished from the Middle East. They were now nothing more than a giant refugee ship cut off from their supply lines. As the skies of the Middle East were covered in black smoke, the GCC royals simply watched the pillars of fire from the burning U.S. military bases in silence from the safe terraces of their palaces. Behind them, oil refineries and desalination plants continued to operate with their lights shining brightly, as if nothing had happened. America completely lost its military presence as the world's policeman in the most humiliating manner by being rejected by its allies. At the same time, this was the moment when the physical foundation of the Petrodollar system, which used overwhelming military power to protect Middle Eastern oil and in exchange forced dollar settlements upon the world, was completely extinguished. The end.